knew 911, I'd call it right now. Hey, Henry. How are you, man? All right. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
He's going to learn a lot.
Yeah. We're pretty want to know it though.
He's got 2 books. Don't you have a special?
I do. Two for 25 on my books, and the square book in one of my books is 2 for 30 because I have to charge 20 to give that money to Tony.
Okay.
So what I need to do is
So I need to give him
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. I know it's very cold, but JB is worth it. JB Hogan is a poet, novelist, and local historian with over a dozen books published. He's a recipient of the Distinguished Citizen Award from the Washington County Historical Society, the Secretary of State's Arkansas Diamond Award, and was an Arkansas Writers Hall of Fame inductee. And that is recent. Yes, that's a recent one. I do want to tell you, after there's going to be question and answer with JB, and we're streaming this event, so even if you have a loud voice and it carries, you'll still have to use a microphone, but I will have this one, and I can just run it over to you if you want to ask a question. Also, before you leave, if you wouldn't mind filling out that program evaluation form that's in your seat, we really appreciate that. It helps us a lot. I'm going to turn it over to JB now. This is going to be great.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Is the volume all right?
Please talk loud.
Hello. I'll come down and talk to Martha. It'll be easier.
Yeah, I can't hear it.
Can you hear me now? Anyway, thank you all for coming. I know it's kind of a lousy day, and it's nice of you to show up. Thank the library. Thank Kelly, Sierra, and Nancy back there handling the books. So today I got two things. I have a little short presentation about writing your own story, which is more motivational than it is specific. And then I'll lead into my book launch, which I'm just going to have some pictures, which I think will be kind of fun to look at, and hopefully, which will. Anyway, so the launches for my book, Somebody Ought to Be Crying, which is obviously meant to be humorous. Although on some levels it's probably serious. Somebody should be crying, but that's a different thing. But anyway, so I'll get into that later on. It's like over 80 little segments, so there's all kinds of crazy stuff. And when I wrote the thing, actually before I turned it in to my publisher, I actually removed about 5 or 6 sections. They were just too personal. So you can't do all that stuff. And even now, when I was going back over the published book, I'm going, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have told that story. Maybe you don't need to know that. But anyway, so let's start with the part about writing your own story, because if you know me, you know I'm always telling people, write your own story all the time. Because, well, let's do that. Write your own story. Let's see if I can move on here. Because, as I say, who knows your story better than you do, number one, right? All right, so, okay, what's the first thing, when I tell people that, what's the first thing they always say to me? Write your own story? Can anybody imagine what it is? I never did anything. Nothing's ever happened. And I'm going, not true whatsoever. Didn't you love somebody? Didn't you maybe get married and have some kids? Didn't you have a really great vacation one time? Weren't you in the service? Didn't you? Everybody's done something. We're not Julius Caesar, we're not Marie Antoinette, but we're still human beings, and we got a story to tell. And I'm going to go through this here before I get too carried away. And there's that usual response. I've never done anything. Not true. You can't hear me? Can you hear me?
No, she can't.
You can't hear me? I'm sorry. Have them translate. Sophia, you tell her what I said. Well, this is coming out here. You can't hear that? I'm sorry.
It's okay. I know most of it.
Yeah, you do. She'll know what part is a lie, which I got wrong, so. Or somebody, Steffi, weren't you going to stand up and go, he made it all up now? Isn't that your thing? Yeah. Years ago, I taught a class called Murder and Mayhem, the dark side of Fayetteville history. And my cousin Larry, he's the reason the book's called Somebody Ought to Be Crying. He stood up in front of like 40 people in an Ollie class and told them I made everything up. And ever since then, that's my favorite thing. See, write my book, he made it up. So there you go. Anyway, so that's, and like I said, everyone has a story. I know every single one of you has a story. Not just me, because I have a book today. And this is important. Your life does matter. Everybody's like I said, we can't all be Julius Caesar. We can't be remembered every day. I mean, I keep harping on him. There are several historical figures and events that stay in my head all the time. I probably think of that stupid guy every day of my life. I think about Julius Caesar every stupid day of my life. Now, other thing, I have others, like I'm obsessed with Joan of Arc, and I'm obsessed with Custer's Last Stand. And I'll tell you why Custer, because I associate myself with the enlisted men, and he got all his men killed. That's not your job. You're supposed to keep them alive. So that's my problem with Custer. Now, he was a great general, though. That's the thing. We're kind of reevaluating. People remember he helped win the Civil War. I'm pretty sure we're glad we won the Union, aren't we? Most of us? Anyway, he was a great general, but he made a really bad mistake. And this is my point I always make. You probably don't believe this, but someone will care about you. And like I said, it might be 2 generations from now, maybe 4. In my family, my thing is my great-grandfather on my mother's side, W.C. Gilbert. What? I don't understand his motivation. We got all these letters and everything, and I kind of understand him, but he left his family up here and stayed in Texas for decades. I'm going, why did you, I mean, I know what he was doing. He's trying to make a fortune, but how can you do that? And I think my grandfather, who you'll see later on a picture of him, I think he resented him pretty much for doing that. But anyway, so someone will care. It might be about 50 years from now, and they'll go, well, what about Uncle so-and-so or Aunt so-and-so? What about them? I'll give you another real quick example. We got an uncle, Uncle Carl. He kind of lived a little shady life sometimes. He was probably a bigamist. And he was in the military, and he re-upped in the military, and he changed his hometown. And I'm going, why would you change your hometown in your military records? He was suddenly from some other state. I'm going, Uncle Carl, we know where you were born. But the military, in those days, this is way back in the 20s, you know, so they didn't have a way to check him real fast. But I thought, there's a story right there, isn't it? Uncle Carl must have felt like there was somebody breathing down. Somebody was coming looking for him. Anyway, okay, so memoir, autobiography, the memoir is usually about a specific or particular part of your life. And then the autobiography is also from your author's perspective, but it's this spans your entire life. And when we get to my book here, you'll see that naturally I have a hybrid of that. That's my stock and trade. Okay, and here I wanted to show some of the memoirs. You're probably familiar with some of these. That first one, okay, you can see the type of topic on the left side in white: important life experiences, childhood memories, travel. I'm sure you remember that Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom. I could have done the same thing, and I still may do it, not as a book, but maybe an article, because I had a Wednesday with Larry. And I was thinking about it last night, what could I write about? And stuff started reappearing, because mostly we'd go have breakfast and come back and have a beer. That was it. That was our thrilling, exciting thing. But anyway, so you probably remember that one. Angela Ashes, of course, was Frank McCourt in the 1920s or 30s in Ireland. Horrible life over there, difficult stuff. That was a great book. And then the 7 Years in Tibet. I've not read that, but I saw the movie with Brad Pitt, I think it was. Yeah, nobody likes him, do they? And particularly the women find him really unattractive, I'm sure. So then we got cultural, survival, and transformation. And Prime Green is Robert Stone. I'm going to come back to that. Robert Stone was my very favorite novelist. He passed away a few years ago. He wrote a book called Dog Soldiers that back in the 70s, won the National Book Award. I read every book he ever wrote. He was just an incredible guy. He hung out, well, I'll get back to that later. I got plenty to talk about Stone. And then we got this one, Survival. You've probably seen that, Adrift. I made a movie out of that one too, where the couple's floating around the ocean for a while. That's a lot of fun. And then this last one, Transformation. This one's about the last quarter of your life, or some of us might be in the last 10%. Just checking. Hey, you got to laugh at something, don't you? So anyway, so writing your story, and I encourage you to do it however you do it. So like, you know, you can do it. You probably don't want to do it like I do it. That's always my message. Do not do what I do. Do not follow me in any way whatsoever. But you might do it life writing style, which tends to be more to nostalgia a lot of times. You could do that. I don't care if it's a list. You know, just write a list. But maybe you even define your life by the people you've known. Maybe it's about all your relatives. Like I was talking about Uncle Carl. We could probably do one in our family. We got a lot of people. My grandpa, my mother's dad, Dad Gilbert we call him, I'll show you in a minute. He was born in 1875. So me to him, 1 year before Custer died, that's all. That's how much time has elapsed, and I knew that man. Isn't that amazing? 1 year before Custer died. Unbelievable. Anyway, so I encourage you, so I do this all the time. I wore out the one about the bicentennial in 3 years from now. I've done that so much I had a meeting and everybody took that over for me. But I'll continue to do this, write your own life, because it's important. Everybody, stuff happens to everybody. You know, I just wrote mine because I'm a regular guy, but maybe some of the stuff that happened to me is a little bizarre, so, and the choices I made were not so good. Anyway, so what motivated me to write a memoir? And it was that Robert Stone, my favorite guy, wrote a book called, what do you call it? Prime Green, Remembering the 1960s. And I had a real affinity for Stone, and he was a member of the Merry Pranksters. Well, he was a peripheral member of the Merry Pranksters. That's like the second wave of the Beatniks. That's Ken Kesey, and it still had Cassidy, Neil Cassidy. He drove the bus. And if you read Dog Soldiers, all those guys are in that in the form. Yeah, he used them all, but anyway, so he was a 60s guy. He wrote about it, and I was a 60s guy, and I'm going, well, he knew a lot more people than I did, but I have had some contact with stuff that's interesting. It's not like that, and I'll show you in my little part here. But what's next on the agenda? My approach to the memoir, as usual, I've created a hybrid. You know, they always want you to write series. I don't write series. I don't do that. And I jump from, you know, I do everything. I write Western novels. I write nonfiction. I write poetry. I do whatever I want to, which I encourage you to do that too. Don't get pinned down by all these things. So and the one thing this is a chronological story, so it's autobiographical in that sense. And one of the things I did in here is that my narrator actually ages. When you read that book, you'll see that's a little boy talking to you. And as it goes on, he ages in, so I did that too. And I think, see if I mentioned that, yeah. And I did use other additional techniques. It's almost like creative nonfiction sometimes, even a little fictional. And some of the stories in this book have actually been, before I'd lifted them out and made them into short stories and things like that. So you'll see them, if you have my books, you'll see them. Anyway, so there. I'm not going to leave this up there very long, because the worst thing in the world is have your own picture on a book. Say, hey, look at my own dang ugly jib all day long. It's like, when I saw this, I told my publisher, I said, get that off of there. And he says, no, this is what they do now. And since he's so good at covers, I said, I'm backing off. Go ahead, whatever you're, but I'm going, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is me like 40 years ago. That's great. And even that's a really bad thing. AI. It's AI. And they wrote the book, too. I never did any of this stuff. It's completely made up. You rats, you. That's what happens when you invite your family to something. Okay, there we go. This is one of my favorite pictures ever. My cousin Walter Allen took this. I did not know this picture existed until about 15 years ago. Let me get out of the way. I'm in everybody's way, aren't I? Scoot over here a little bit. So that's my grandpa, Dad Gilbert, I mentioned before. He's about 6 foot tall, and you can see what a giant I was at the time. By the way, you can see I had hair. I want people to know there's hair on that head. Don't be making fun of me. And it's a family reunion in Mayfield in 1947. I like to terrorize clerks at stores when they ask your age or something. I go, I have memories from the 1940s, and they start backing off. Maybe think I'm Count Dracula or something. But anyway, I just love this picture because that's Dad Gilbert. He like our family's all short. We're the classic UK guys. I always tell everybody, this is me 500 years ago. I'm plowing behind a horse, and the Vikings land over here. And they're 6 foot tall. They're gigantic. They got horns on their helmets, which they didn't have. But they got horns on their helmets, and they come over and they just beat the tar out of me. That's how it goes. Anyway, so that's me and Dad Gilbert at the family reunion. And you can see I see in the little white things I did that. That's the page number that at least has something related to the picture here for you in the book back there. Anyway, Dad Gilbert spoiled me rotten when I was a kid. I mean, that guy, I still remember. He died when I was 7 and a half, but I remember clearly. And I remember he'd let me wear his stuff. I had his hat on, his boots, and I kicked him with the boots off one and hit him one time, and he scolded me. Man, I thought my life had ended right on the spot. Anyway, he was a great man. And this is down here in Fayetteville. That's down at the end of Combe Street, 350 South Combe Street. It's the parking lot now for the Church of Christ. It kind of faces Willow. That was where we lived in a craftsman home down there in the early 50s after my granddad died. And this is in the backyard. There's a field back there where Mr. Parker had his horses. And that's my mom up there. I call her Granny Goose. My cousin Larry just shortened it to the Goose. Anyway, you'll see a picture of me and Larry in a minute. So anyway, so that's Granny Goose up there, and that's me beside us and my brother Bill's. I think that's a 39 Chevy. That was a really fine car. But I wanted you to notice the flaps on my hat. I do not remember having that hat, but that's a good one. Anyway, that was a great place. That's the last time the family was all together before my brother Bill went in the service, and so that's a good place. That's when I went to Jefferson School. I walked across Mr. Parker's fence. His pastor, he rented from Ivan Wages, had his horses there, went by Buddy Hayes' house and over to Jefferson every day. You remember Buddy Hayes, the musician? A lot of you might remember him. And there's the, oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I wanted to mention, one of the things my mother did, that's why I'm here today, is she read to me constantly as a child. So I don't remember learning how to read, which I think is a really good thing. You already know before you even get started. The earliest memory I have is asking her words in the newspaper. That's my earliest memory. So that was a really good thing. Appreciate that one. But dig my flap hat. Come on. I'm a style icon, as y'all know. Okay, there we are. Now, I don't want this to sound wrong, but see Larry's scrunched up face? I think he looks a little bit like Chairman Mao, don't you? That's my cousin Larry, acting like a fool. He was 2 years older than me, and so he had all the ideas, and I loved to follow on those ideas. I'm an idiot. We were both idiots. Our parents, our moms were sisters. His mom was my mom's younger sister, and I'm sure at some stage when we were both around 2 or 3 years old, they were going, what happened? Why did this happen? We didn't do anything. Why are these here? But you can see I'm having a good, that's that little guy there, that's me enjoying whatever's Larry doing. I'm going to tell the story now, but I could talk about Larry all day long. But he was always, he was always trying to make me see Indians in the sky. They were always appearing up there. And I could never see them, but I looked for them. And when we played games all the time, I was always the team that got beat. And of course, being raised in this environment that we were, I had to be the Union and he was the Confederate, which just tickles me to death. Anyway, that doggy on the right there, I think that's Mickey, one of their little doggies, and I've forgotten the other doggy. It might be a trailer, I'm not sure. But anyway, and the old barn's about to fall down up there and over there. But we had a great time out there. So anyway, this is, I say, post-crime silliness. Okay, here's my story from the title of my book. It has to do with Martha, her wedding. December 1954 at that house on Combe Street. It was an old craftsman home, just had basically one room, and it had bedrooms on the side and a little kitchen there on the side and a little back porch that was screened in. So anyways, having Martha's wedding there, and the seating's to the back of the front, and me and Larry are sitting about 3/4 of the way back. And Larry, so it's going fine, everything's good, my mom's up there, everything, it's going fine, and Larry leans over to me and he says, you know what's missing from this wedding, don't you? And I said, what? He says, somebody ought to be crying. And so now I go into Andy Griffith mode, and I said, we commenced a caterwauling right there. And so we leaned back and cut loose, crying out, wah, wah. And so this is my favorite part of the story. My mother's at the front, and she was back at us so fast that I think that the term nanosecond hadn't been used yet, but that's how fast she got there. And so you see scary movies where the monster's over here, and then boom, they're right next to you. That's Granny Goose. Whoop, she was right there. And so I had to depend on Larry for the rest of the story because it so traumatized me, I have completely blacked out after that point. She's whoop, right there. And Larry said that Granny Goose grabbed us by our collar, as mothers were wont to do in the old days, grabbed us by the collars, drug us right out of there, took us over to one of the bedrooms and shoved us in there and said, don't come out till the wedding's over. Slammed the door. So that's why this book is called Somebody Ought to Be Crying. Because it's almost my favorite memory. A lot of my favorite memories are when I screwed. My mother had lines that you didn't cross, And my favorite, they weren't then, but they're my favorite stories now is when I would cross those lines. Because, man, you knew when you crossed the line. These guys know. My nieces know. You didn't know where the line was. I would never want to be a parent because I didn't know where the line was. I didn't know where the line was, but boy, my mom knew where it was. All them, they were Gilberts. All the Gilbert women knew exactly where the line was. I never knew. Until you crossed it, then you knew really well. But anyway, so that's us back in the day. So this is like, I think there's actually, it's like I said, I think that might be 1956, about 56, based on everything. That's the year Mantle won the Triple Crown in the American League. That's how my life is based on baseball. Anyway, so that's a story, my favorite story. I mean, he was the idea man. Larry was really creative, and he always had plans. There'd be one night we were out and it was cold, snowing. There was a wolverine. There's no wolverines around here. We're walking in the middle of the night. It was full moonlit night on the snow, looking for a wolverine. Would he killed us if he found us? So that's all we did. Okay, so I'm jumping a bunch of times. So then, after my sophomore year here at Fayetteville High, we moved out to Imperial Valley in California, a little town called Calipatria, for my mom to recover from her. And for me, it was like the best thing that ever happened in the world because I didn't grow anymore. I'm the shrimp, and all my pals are like whoop, and they're all big, and so I'm dropping out of the sports. You know, I can't compete anymore. So I moved to our little town, this little town of Calipatria, and I think yeah, anyway, dig those crazy socks on me. That's my senior year picture. I'm bad. Anyway, so anyway, we moved out there. I think the title of the section is if your graduating class has 49 people in it, you got a chance to do stuff, something like that. And so I did. I got to play all the sports, and that's wonderful. So like I was our starting defensive right halfback, and I returned punts and kickoffs, which is I remember practically every play I was ever in my whole life. It was exciting. And I got to do that stuff. And I tell everybody, when you play sports, that's why they're so important to me. It doesn't matter what level you're at. It feels the same to you. The excitement is there. The failure, the success, all that's there. And you never forget it. I remember, like my last game, I remember almost every single tackle I was in, almost all the plays. And I'm 900 years old now. I still remember that. I remember playing baseball. I can still remember it. I always thought it was so wonderful. Sometimes a guy would throw a pitch, and you could just see it coming, this big old thing, and oh, baby. And you knew you were just going to smash that sucker. And it was such a good feeling. But anyway, so that's me, number 20. My senior year, I thought I should have made like honorable mention all conference, but I didn't, so I've harbored that resentment. Anyway, so then the next step was I went after 1 year of junior college where I played baseball and realized that I was not going to go anywhere. I joined the service like my two brothers before. And so you notice I'm usually an Air Force boy, and so that's just for fun. And I went in August '64, and this is from the little Calipatria Herald newspaper out there in our little hometown, where they talk about me going in there. So I served from July actually of '64 to July of '68, 4 years. And I think in one of the articles you'll see, I think it says it's 3 basic training, and I realized I had three years, 10 months, and so many days to go. I realized right away I was not a military kind of guy. There was a couple of problems. I had one as a stupidly arrogant little punk, and the second one I didn't realize I had a male authority problem. So I didn't like people yelling at me. Any guy that knows the service, don't pay any attention to the yelling. Listen to what the message is and let the yell go over. But being a little dummy, I was going, and being an arrogant little blankety blank, they'd give these classes and these guys, blah, 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 blah. The guy is an idiot, and so there you go. I'm off to a great start. So it only took a while to get out. Okay, so I finally got out. Did I jump one? Yeah, I jumped one there. Yeah, so here we go. Okay, so this is only 18 months after I'm out. Anybody who's just been in the service, you know what the readjustment blues. It takes you a while to become a civilian again. It takes about a year and a half, and this is right about the time. Of course, this is 69, 70, so the world's really different. So that's me there on the front with the headband and I'm writing poetry. That's spring of 1970 in Warrensburg, Missouri, Central Missouri, which is where our friend Amy used to be here as a librarian. She went there, And Heather up there, she went there too. So I got used to have two pals here that went to the same school. Of course, I went, when we rode dinosaurs up to class. But anyway, what's fun about this picture for me, besides just remembering, is the guy in the yellow shirt to the right was Walt Gum. He was my roommate in this house we lived at. Gum died some years ago, but all the rest of those people are still with us, and they're all still friends of mine, and we're all still in contact. So that's really great. The guy down there looking at me in the hat, that's Steve Perkins. The guy on the left up there, the guy with the military jacket is Alty. I don't think he went to Nam, but these two guys are both combat veterans. And so they're good friends of mine. The guy on the left, Marv Glendenning, he was the first guy that I knew. This is way back, he's the first guy to come back from Nam that was telling me what was actually happening over there. That we were having, we weren't just winning all the time. He tells a funny story one time. He accidentally shot a guy in the foot with a .45. Not very funny to the guy, but, and then Perk has been my buddy ever since then. He's a great guy. And then, so after all that stuff, you could follow the story in there, as I had a bunch of trouble up in Missouri, and I ended up out in Colorado, and as I think I was telling them, where's Sierra here? I was a garbage man for a while, and that's a humbling experience. and fun, it was actually kind of fun. I worked with a guy named, what was his name? Frosty Ketchum. That was the weirdest little dude I ever worked with in my life. I had a pair of gloves, I found them on the ground, so I had gloves. It was really hard. It's the first day of my being a garbage man. It snowed this is in Boulder, snowed 18 inches, and you had to carry the trash cans out of the backyards. Man, I was wore out after that. And then later on, though, we went to a trailer park, and they had to put their garbage out in a bag, and I was like, man, this is a great job, because we could ride on the back of the dump truck, the garbage truck, and jump and fling them in there and just go, instead of toting them up there. I got to tell you one story. I made Frosty the happiest man who ever lived one day. First of all, he knew everybody's habits on the route. He would tell me how many beer cans or bottles, how many Playboys. He knew everything about the people. Anyway, so one time on the early days, I was carrying a big old trash can up there, and I slipped or something, and it poured all over me. Oh my God, he thought that was the best thing ever happened. He thought that was just the greatest thing. Anyway, so after all that happened, I worked for an Indian newspaper for a while for a crook. We got an edition of the paper out, and I'm glad I did that. But anyway, then I started working for the parks up in Lincoln. And in '74, I was the lead man on the mowing crew, drove a big old wing mower and stuff. I was a big shot. Anyway, it was a really interesting experience. You guys will understand this. In those days, in Lincoln, I used to joke that this was a welfare job for hippies, because nobody would hire you because you had long hair and beards, but the parks didn't care. Because you're out in the park working. They don't care what you look like. So I would literally come out of there, and it would be like 80% of the employees were long hairs. And so that was fun. Anyway, this picture was taken in '74 after we'd made a trip to Puerto Rico coming back. And the hat I'm wearing, that engineer's cap, when I left the parks up there, they hung that on the wall it was pretty grungy hat. But sometimes I tell this story too. Sometimes when I look back, I go, maybe I should have stayed at the parks, I might have done better. But one day I'm driving along, plunk on my mower, on the wing mower, and I pull up, take a break, and then this idea just pops in my head. I need to go back to school and become a teacher. I don't know where that came from. So whoop, and I remember exactly where I was when it happened. I stopped the mower, shut the blade down, and just sat there and went, time to do something different. And then, like I said, later on, I should have maybe stayed. So then I go back to school, and I had messed around so much as an undergrad. When I got out of the service, I knew exactly what I had to do to get a C, which is nothing. And so that's what I got. So I had a really crappy GPA when I had like 2.49 or something. So even the University of Puerto Rico, in which we'd visit our friends there, I ended up going there, even they put me in on probation. But by this time, I'm like almost 30 years old. It's a different world. So from then on, I was a 4.0 kind of guy, but that's because I was so motivated. But anyway, this is on La Finca was a teacher housing at the University of Puerto Rico. My advisor got me and my ex in there, and this is when I'm writing my my master's thesis in 1976. The reason I had used this picture is that's the longest my hair ever got. because when we came back to the States to work on my PhD at Arizona State, I got what I called a haircut, which, everybody look at those pictures, really? That's what you thought was a haircut? But anyway, I went from 69 to 76 without getting a haircut. So look now, that shows you. Anyway, so, and there's, again, the page number. So, and I did this. This is not in the book, but I did this for fun. This is, when I was in Tucson, I was a part of a group that was opposed to the U.S. involvement in Central America at the time, you know, the Contra War. And so this is at a rally at a park in Tucson. That's me over here on the side. You can see I still have some brown on my beard. It's not all white. And there's Joe, I can't remember Joe's last name. He's married. Do you recognize the lady in the red jacket? Anybody? Anybody recognize her? That's Barbara Kingsolver. You know, she's won the Pulitzer Prize for that demon head thing. So I was always complaining, Barbara got to live my life. Come on, what's going on here? But anyway, that was her. That's my friend Tom Jackson. Some of you met Tom Jackson. He came back here for the Singing in Zion signing of the book about my family and my mom. And that's their first little kids there. And that's me over there. And I think I'm holding some radical rag I wrote for the thing called Con Plomo with lead. So anyway, nobody said I wasn't insane. So that's just an extra for you. And then we're getting towards the end here. And this is like just recently, a few years back, 7 or 8 years ago. I think East of Zion is a family band. I was in there. You can see I played upright bass. And we played here a couple of times here, really fun. And this was over at the KUF studios over there before the first time we played. And I actually know exactly what song we're playing here. It's Daniel Prayed. And so we're having a great time there. I love being in that band. They had all the talent. I was the bass player. So I just tried to be steady and dependable. That was all I tried to be. They had all the talent. So there you go. And I think that might get us close to... Yes, I almost forgot. This is my favorite photograph of me ever in my entire life. And I wanted my publisher to put it back there with my author's thing at the back, and he didn't do it. I said, come on, man. So this is like mid-'80s maybe, or early 80s probably. It's up in the White Mountains in Arizona. And we were camping, and I always loved to chop wood. And so this is my ex took the picture, and I got the thing, and you can't see it so much, a little bit. I had a chipped tooth right here, and I look like an absolute madman. I'm going, this is the absolute favorite picture ever taken of me. So there you go. And I think that's it then. And this is all my books, which are back there all laid out there. I want to say something. People a lot of times say I'm prolific, and it's not actually true. Prolific is Stephen King. You write a 1,000-page novel every year. Hello? I don't know how you do that. But anyway, it's accumulation. It's taken so long for me to get published. Some of these books were written in the 80s. And my next one, I think my next one is going to be, I wrote it in 96. That's how long it's taken me to succeed. Like I said, never do what I do. Never follow any pattern I've done. But anyway, there they all are, and they're all back there. And I think, ladies and germs, that's that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Do you have a favorite? What is your favorite book you've written?
That's a really good question. And it's a good one, too, because I usually don't think in those terms. But lately I've been thinking that I like Living Behind Time the best because it has some sections in there that are my favorites. There's a section in there where the protagonist, he goes from California to Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, big cross-country trip. When he's in Pensacola, Florida, he gets sort of adopted by a couple who lost their son in Vietnam. I love that. It's real moving to me. Anyway, yeah.
You touched on this a little bit in the beginning about, thinking about maybe taking out certain stories or guessing.
Yeah.
I'm working on a memoir, and the thing that I'm really struggling with is how to be honest. The courage to be honest, because there are people who might get upset about the story or whatever. Right?
Great point, because you mentioned that. It's like, after I was looking at this, I'm going, really? Did I need to tell? I'm not sure what to say. It's a fine line. You're just going to have to reevaluate. What I would say is write it and then go back and decide what you think.
And so when you're deciding whether or not to keep something in, what's your thought process about going through that? How do you decide?
Well, for me, it's I keep my personal life really private. Okay. And so, for example, you've seen I've made there's no reference in this book to my marriage.
Okay.
And I keep that kind of stuff to myself. And so I didn't go into any of that kind of detail about that part of my life.
So do you kind of define that going in, saying this is some things that I'm going to be out of bounds going in? Do you know that already, or do you write it and then sort of decide what's out of
I
bounds?
think I wrote it and decided because I think the what am I looking for?
Self-censorship?
Self-censorship is a really bad idea.
Okay.
Go ahead and blast through it,
Okay.
and then do your censorship.
Okay.
Like years ago, I wrote a short story, and it had a little bit of a sexual stuff to it, and I thought, my mother will read this story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started panicking. I go, oh my God. And of course, my mother could have handled it easily, but I rewrote the story. I toned it down, because there's no way I want my mom to read what I wrote there.
And do you regret toning it down? Do you regret toning it
No,
down?
I don't. No, because I was also writing. I wrote a book. It ended up. I've written books where I cannibalize them and put them in other books. I wrote one. It was all war stories, military stories, and I wrote the way we talked and stuff. And I went, "Good Lord, I can't put that out. You can't. You can get a little of it to get the flavor, but you can't. I mean, the service guys, it's a swear word every 2 seconds, and you try to break records for how vulgar you can be. And so, anybody who's been in the military knows that. You just can't. You can't talk like you do, and you can't write like that either. You can get a little flavor of it, so they know what's going on, but you can't really do that. So, like the old Navy guys, right? I didn't mention this. We have another uncle, Uncle Burl Allen. He's married to another one of my mom's sisters years ago. Uncle Burl was in the Navy back in the 20s. Hello. Anyway, Uncle Burl swore so much that even I was freaked out by it. I can't actually repeat it but he would start every sentence with a double swear word every time. And like I first met him when I was a teenager out in California, and you'd be in a group of people and he'd just take off and I'd be going, what happened? But Uncle, that was him. That was Uncle Burl. And he was a great guy, but merciful heavens, you had to be on your toes. Yes. Have you got the mic?
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry, Henry.
Hey.
I'm blind as a bat, Henry. Sorry.
No problem. One thing, like he was just asking there, I included my brother in a story, and I thought it sounded authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
he pushed me away from him and his friend. We were walking down the street, and my big brother pushed me away. And he came back after he read it, and he said, "Boy, I must have been an ogre." And I was like, well, I thought it was real representative, so
Yeah.
it wasn't that bad, but
Right.
it made him feel bad. So I understand what you said
That's
about your mother and
yeah.
reading that. But
That's a good point.
one thing about crossover, you were talking about what you write about. If you write about a memory and then write about something else, I've been finding that when I do that, well, this one should have been in that one, and should I write about this again? And even though it's been in this one, and how do you handle that as far as life events?
Well, I think what I did there is I violated the memoir rule by making it autobiographical and linear.
Okay.
That's how I did it, because I'm not very good at. I'm not you read a novel sometimes and a guy just puts all this stuff together and all comes together at the end. I can't do that. I'm not. My brain only operates this way. So that's my solution.
Okay.
And I get that from doing the local history too, because it's all chronological. So everything to me is kind of linear. I'm not the circular thought guy. I hope that answered that, Henry. Yeah.
Hi, do you remember what age you were when you first wrote your book or wanted to write a book?
Yeah, I was writing for my mom when I was like in grade school. I wrote little stories for Granny Goose. And then I was telling Murray back there, we have a friend in common, Jim Kelton. Some of you guys might remember Jim Kelton. We were lifetime friends, childhood friends. When we were in the 6th grade, we decided, let's write a novel. And the funny part of that is we don't remember his novel, but we both remember the one I wrote, which was easily the worst book ever written by anybody, 6th grade or not. Mine was a basketball book about some guy named Man Mountain something, and all he did was just score 90 points a game or something and win the game. That's all it was, over and over and over and over. But Kelton remembered it too. It was horrible. So at least 6th grade. And I had a service buddy, Terry Curley, passed away a few years ago, and I don't remember this, but when we were stationed in Japan, he told me that I had told him I wanted to be a writer. I don't even remember doing that. But soon, about like within a year and a half out of the service, I'm starting to write. So it must have been, well, I think it's because of my mother reading to me, for crying out loud, you know. And then it took me a while to realize I was an English major too. I don't know why. Because when I went to college, I was a astronomy major, which I wish I'd have stayed for a while. Political science, I don't know what was up with that. And one semester, I was a business major. Hello, that was not me at all. And then after that one, I went into English, which is where I was supposed to have been all along. Yeah, Murray?
Or what kind of mood or setting, or what makes the difference between when you feel poetry coming on or when you feel a story coming on?
That's a great question right there, especially right now, because I believe I've written the fiction out. I think I've said everything I need to say. I don't know, but it feels like that. The local history I just work on all the time, but the only thing that happens now is poems come to me. And I always quote, I heard Carlos Santana one time say, he never writes a song, they come to him. And that's what's happening to me, and I don't understand it because I'm not really that's not my style. I usually am thinking ahead, I'm going to write this, I have an idea. But now they just come to me out of the ether. I think maybe it's just like the build-up or something. Sometimes I can write them, if there's a topic, every now and then I can write on a topic, which is odd, because I never did that before. I just recently did 3 poems with the topic was feral, and it worked. I was able to write 3 poems about that, but a lot of times they simply come to me. In the old days when I was writing, I had stories I had in mind. There were specific things. Now, in my fiction and stuff, the most autobiographical book I ever wrote was called Losing Cotton. It's the only one that's connected to Living Behind Time. Losing Cotton is a story of a coming of age story, and the other one's coming of middle age story. And it's the same protagonist. Actually, I think I had to change the name because I didn't realize it was the same guy till I finished the second book. It's the same person, same character. But anyway, I would have those ideas in mind, and I would go with those, and they'd be based on stuff. But you always say write what you know, and I kind of do that, but the main thing in my fiction that I hang my hat on is the geography. Or if you read a story of mine and you're in a location, if you live there, you're going to know exactly where you're at. Like in my first book, The Apostate, there's about a carjacking. When they're coming out of Tucson, and I'm telling you the streets, you can go right to those streets, so that's exactly where they're at. And that one I have one of my favorite things. It's like, I used to do this trip all the time between Tucson and Boulder, and you get to Deming, New Mexico, and there's a highway that cuts across the hatch. Can't remember the number, 36 or 50 or whatever. And I always take that, and about halfway over there, there's a cafe, and it's called the Middle of Nowhere Bar and Restaurant. That's the name of it. And it is exactly the middle of nowhere. And that's the kind of thing I key on. And so, like, the only time in my book, Mexican Skies, there are 2 short novels in there. They're almost like a Mexico travelogue. But I always tell everybody, I would love for somebody to see if they could do this. There's one location that I actually had to research in there. I always want to see if anybody can pick it out that I wasn't actually at. Every other place I was at in Mexico. There's one place I wanted them to go to, but I never got there. So I researched this stuff, and I always wonder if anybody could pick that out. So that's the kind of thing I do.
You mentioned that sometimes your stories show up in multiple places in your
Yeah.
writing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you acknowledge that it showed up someplace else? Like when you tell a story again, do you reference the other story, or like how do you handle that?
No, that's a good point. I think I've done a couple of those. I did one. There's one in the book here. After if you read the book, you see I got the what beat out of me up in Missouri in a bar fight one time, and I immediately followed with my family tried to take me out. Well, I read that story about the family trying to take. It's all jokes about how accidents when I was a kid, and I blame my family or all this stuff just for fun. I read that for Tales of the South down in North Little Rock for a NPR program called Tales of the South. I included it in there. I don't think I put it in there, but there's other stories. I'm trying to remember. I've actually read them. Sometimes I even write poems and stories with the same title. Like I got one, the Hemingway Hotel. It's a story and a poem because it's based on an experience I had on the island of Culebra off of Puerto Rico. It's a beautiful little island, beautiful little place. No cars allowed, and just an incredible place. And so I do that kind of thing. But I do that, and the answer to the bottom part of your question is, the bottom line, I do not acknowledge it. It just is
So
there.
it's for the reader to
I acknowledge it when I talk or stuff or somebody asks me.
But it's for the reader to make the
Yeah, they
connection.
might, the echo might, they might go, wait a minute, didn't I know that already? Yeah, where'd that come from? Anybody else? Leanne?
Jerry, what do you consider your most prolific years in your career as a
Oh,
writer?
that's interesting too. I think I really got rolling, I think, in the mid-'80s. Oh, thank you for doing that, because that's another story to tell you. So in the mid-'80s, I've been writing for 15 years, zero success at all. And I was totally frustrated. So I took all my stuff and I'm quitting. I took all my writing, I put it in a closet, and the very next day I started living behind time. The very next day. So I took the stuff out and said, don't do that anymore. You're not going to stop writing. So I think the mid-'80s when I really got, I kind of hit my stride. Now I've had to revise everything too, but I would say then, in terms of local history, it's been the last 10 years. But as far as that, yeah.
And as far as your process, do you write by hand? Do you write on the computer? What are your tools?
That's a fun one too. So I used to write by hand. But my late brother-in-law, Kirby Estes, shamed me out of writing by hand. He said, what are you doing? Get on the computer. And it took me a while, and I thank him all the time for forcing me to do that, because it saves like a middleman. You'd have to retype it all. Well, just learn how to type it there. And so I've learned how to write my stories and everything online right there. And I've also finally learned some years back, to edit on there too, other people's stuff. Because I get a lot of people asking me to look at their stuff. And so, yeah, so it's all computerized now. But I absolutely did. I will still take notes sometimes. I will still take notes by hand, but the actual writing process is all down there. And in terms of write a poem, if I do not write the poem right then, it's not going to happen. That's something that's happened too. I wish I was Samuel Taylor Coleridge and could write the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but I'm not. I can only write short stuff, and it has to happen right now, because I don't get the, I've even written poems. I just stopped and deleted them, 3/4 of the way through, because I couldn't finish. Thank you for that.
I may have missed this in your description of your life, but has there been any newspaper work in your career?
Well, thanks for that. That's a good question too. So, like as a student at the University at Central Missouri, I was a student journalist, minor in print journalism, and I won a bunch of awards at the University of Missouri, and I wrote for the student paper. And so when I got done there, I applied. There's a place in those days you could send them your resume, if you will, and I got a whole bunch of job offers, like West Palm Beach Times, Yuma Daily Sun. I can't remember. I got a job off, but I didn't take them because I wanted to stay with my now long ago ex. I wanted to stay there. And then when that happened, after that, I did it again, like 15 years later with no more experience, and I got the same job offers. And the reason I didn't ever do it, the reason I didn't go into journalism, is I could not picture myself being a cub reporter or writing obituary stuff. I wanted to go directly into like a literary editor, and you just don't get to do that. And I'll tell you guys, it's a good one. I had a job offer from them, Jackson, Mississippi newspaper, $175 a week to cover the KKK. I said, I'm sorry, I had another job offer. There's no way, and you know what, that I'm going to go cover the KKK for $175 a week and get killed by them guys. Thank you. So anyway, that was a full-blown offer, and I felt horrible at the time because my academic career had gone down the tubes, and I was still married. I needed to make some money, but I'll be darned if I was going to do that. I kind of wanted to live my life. Can you imagine? I'm not even thinking about that. Anything else? Yeah, Henry.
Do you have a special place or time period when writing is good for you, or do you just pop in any time?
That's another great question. I do not. I'm totally erratic about it. There's only one thing. If I'm writing, I'm not reading, and if I'm reading, I'm not writing, because who you're reading will come into your system. Like I remember when I stayed with Martha and Kirby back in 1970, I was really into Leonard Cohen, and I actually had to write a poem in direct imitation of Leonard Cohen to get him out of there. Now, I didn't keep it, but I just had to get it out of there. That's the kind of thing I do. Anyway, oh yeah, and I don't have like, I'm not one of the guys that sets up a certain time and writes every day. When I was writing a novel or something, I'll get into kind of a groove. I like to write morning, afternoon, and evening when I'm on a run like that, and so I try to stay in that groove, but that's only during that spell. And it just hits, like I said, I have no idea anymore at all. And with the local history, that's just depending on what I'm researching. And that comes, like I just did a bunch of articles that will start appearing in the next flashback, where I just took really weird stuff that happened in Fayetteville, and I wrote 6 articles with about 3 or 4 of these weird things in each one of them. And that happened like last year about this time, almost a year ago, and I just cranked that all out, and now I haven't done anything since then that way. But I still do stuff all the time, but I'm not writing. It's very, very erratic. I have no, there's no sense of it at all. Thank you. Anybody else? Are we done then? All right, thank you guys. Thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you.
I didn't get your email address. Thank you very much. I
Pardon
didn't
me?
get your email address.
Yeah.
Could I get
Yeah.
your email address?
Yeah.